Okay, thank you. Thank you all for being here for the fourth QEI seminar. So the QEI is a growing community of researchers who believe in the importance of assessing the physical resource cost of quantum technologies. And it's through this community we support relevant research and aid the swapping of ideas in this field. And to this end, Raja, Federico, and I are organizing the QEI seminars to highlight the great ongoing research in this field. And we believe now is the time to be growing the QEI, whilst we still face other challenges in developing this technology, because of course, there's no point in an energy efficient device that doesn't perform, but we need to be able to understand the resource cost, especially at scale, while the tech is still nascent and therefore more malleable. And this is something we're hopefully going to learn more about as along with other things from our speaker today, Zeki Seskir. So thank you for being here, Zeki. So he's a doctoral researcher at Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. ITAS, it's the Institute for Technology and Assessment in Systems Analysis, and he's the coordinator of the project QTech, Quantum Technologies Innovations for Society. And he's very active in the field of responsible technology, quantum technology, from conducting landscaping studies, education and research, outreach research, and sort of the ethics of this technology as well. So thank you, Zeki. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Emily, and thanks to the QEI community for the invitation. Let me share my screen. And I hope that you all can see it. Okay, so just changing the slides. Thanks for the invitation. Today I will talk about something a little bit different than the usual discussions in the community, and the title that I chose is like, it's a kind of weird title, what can we learn from the techno-economic paradigms literature for quantum technologies? I will try to be, as I said, quick about the presentation because I'm rather excited about the discussion part, but still I will just go not that deep, but I will try to explain the concepts a little bit before the discussion to have a mutual understanding of what I mean by these things. As introduced, I'm Zeki. If you are interested in reaching out to me, here's my email, and just feel free to connect on LinkedIn. And today I will do a very brief introduction. I will again very briefly talk about what I mean when I say quantum technologies. I know that we mostly understand the same things, but for completeness sake, I will just talk about it very briefly. Then I will move to these concepts called contra-DF waves and technological revolutions. The concepts of techno-economic paradigms and how is it relevant for quantum technologies. And then I will just continue with some additional concepts like path-dependency, technology adoption, and beyond. And then I will conclude. And for those who already watched or who was present for the workshop in Singapore, there will be some overlaps, but it is primarily new content, I hope. So let's begin. Well, Emily introduced our Institute for Technology Assessment and Systems Analysis, but just a disclaimer, in German it is Institut für Technikfolgenabschätzung und Systemanalyse, which means we are interested in the intended and unintended consequences of technology, so not just the technologies themselves, but the consequences of the technologies. And we kind of work together with the Office of Technology Assessment at the German Bundestag and the Panel for the Future of Science and Technology at the European Parliament. And again, as introduced, I am the coordinator of this project called QTech, and we have three main topics at ITAS under QTech. Landscaping of the QT ecosystems. So this includes something like, startups, patents, publications, investment, those kind of things. The second topic is education and outreach research in QT. And the third main topic is something we called concept exploration and operationalization for ethical, legal, and societal aspects research on QT. It's a mouthful, I know, but today's talk is primarily about this last topic. And again, when I say quantum technologies, what I mean, or what I will mean during this presentation is basically there's this macroscopic world There are certain principles that we can observe in this world, which are not really present in the classical world that we kind of live in. And as of the last couple of decades, we were able to develop certain technologies that are directly attributable to these principles. And this, the second generation quantum technologies are primarily these set of technologies. And in general, when we say, quantum technologies and the related fields, we mean the applications resulting from these technologies. In the European context, the European Union basically, through the flagship, focuses on these 4 pillars: quantum communication, quantum computation, quantum simulation, quantum sensing, and metrology. So it's not just computation. There's a constellation of technologies, and it's not just these 4 main pillars. There are other topics like quantum biology, quantum thermodynamics, and other emerging topics and fields under quantum technologies in general, but primarily these are the most mature and just most developed ones. And why are we interested in this? I think this is something everybody has seen like a million times, but there's a huge public investment into these technologies globally from many different countries, which makes it rather interesting for us as a public institute that is focused on the consequences of these technologies and future acceptability of these technologies. So it is, it is one of the technologies that, it's not the only technology that is getting this kind of investment, but it is definitely one that is requiring certain attention from our side as well. And of course, as you know, if you go to the flagship's website, it says the future is quantum and we're interested in the future. So, that's why, we believe that we need to be in the space. Now, let's move on. Well, the first concept I would like to introduce and kind of discuss later on is this thing called the contra-DF waves. This goes back almost a century, and let's say luckily it coincides with basically quantum mechanics. And what happens is that Nikolai Kondratyevsky, who was a Soviet economist, kind of observed, looking at the historical data on prices and interest rates, that there's kind of a almost 50-year wave in the rise and fall of prices and interest rates. And he just observed this in 1925. But later on, the economists also kind of continued his observation and tried to formalize and just theorize on it. And they also kind of realized that each of these waves correspond to a different constellation of technologies. So there was this argument on, okay, so these waves should be somehow related with the rise and fall of these technologies. When you look at the actual historical data, it's not as neat as this 50-year very oscillatory cycle. But you can still argue that there is at least a sort of a cycle going on in these things called the business waves. So these are 10-year average returns on S&P 500, which kind of acts as a proxy for the general situation of the market. And you can see that they are kind of related to certain technologies. They are not, it wouldn't be really scientific to argue that they are one-to-one corresponding, but still the wave-like motion of these business cycles is rather apparent. So just remember that Kondratyevsky kind of observed this in 25, and just looking at almost 2 cycles, and these cycles have been continuing ever since. And when especially the development economists kind of investigated these cycles and the corresponding technologies, they formulated this kind of an S-shaped curve, which argues that, okay, so first there's a radical innovation, there are some exploratory improvements on this innovation, and then after a dominant design kind of emerges, there is a clear direction for accelerated improvements and successive models to follow these. And then when the trajectory is constricted, which means the technology matures and there's a lock-in, then there's the maturity period, and just there's no more radical innovation. There's just incremental innovation on top of what is already there. And one of the main researchers in this topic is Carlota Perez, who is a Venezuelan British economist, and she kind of formulated these technological revolutions into the last 5 ones, like the initial industrial revolution, steam and railways, steel, electricity, and heavy engineering, oil, automobile, and mass production, and then lastly the ICT. And here you can see that, at least looking at the years, this last one should be coming to its end. And again, just to show you this, it also seems like we are moving into the 6th contradive wave since the initial industrial revolution. And when she formulated the structure of these technological revolutions, she argued for several different levels related to the interconnection of these technologies. First, I mean, when I say a technological revolution, it's not just a single technology, but it is kind of a constellation of technologies, let's say. She argues that they stem from the same areas of knowledge in science and technology and use similar engineering principles. They require similar skills for their design and operation, quite often new ones compared to the old ones. They stimulate the upstream development of a common network of suppliers of inputs and services, as well as interdependent distribution outlets. Their dynamism is mutually driven through very strong interlinkages, often being the main market for each other. And their diffusion generates coherent patterns of consumption and use, so that the learning in one system facilitates the learning in the next, and the installation of conditions for the use of set of products becomes an externality for the next. So some examples for this is, when you get electricity for lighting and refrigeration, you can use it for something else like radios and vacuum cleaners. And when we look at these things, for example, the similar skills, often new ones, which means there's a consolidation in the workforce, which is a huge topic right now for quantum technologies. They stem from same areas of knowledge, which means they are kind of doing this constructive interference in terms of developing novel inventions and ideas. And also, there's a logistic aspect to it. They have similar vendors, they have similar services provided by these vendors. So the idea is that they need to be somehow supporting each other to actually become a revolutionary force in the techno-economic market. But the title is techno-economic paradigms, but what do we mean, or what do they mean by a paradigm? Again, this concept, I think everybody is aware, was initially popularized and used by Thomas Kuhn in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And he kind of defines paradigm in different ways, but the most common one he uses is universally recognized scientific achievements. So this is for a scientific paradigm that for a time provide model problems and solutions for a community of researchers. So what the economists basically did, they took this paradigm concept, the scientific paradigm concept, and they applied it to this techno-economic understanding of these contradive waves. And if you just scratch the scientific word and just put techno-economic, then probably it is the same thing. So Perez kind of defines this in almost this very similar way, but instead of focusing on the achievements, she focuses on the model for the most effective ways of using the new technologies within and beyond the new industries. So while the new sectors expand to become the engines of growth, the techno-economic paradigm that results from their use guides a vast reorganization and a widespread rise in productivity across pre-existing industries. And as most of us are not that old to remember the age of the steel and automobiles, we can primarily connect this to the ICT revolution that happened in the 70s and the 80s, and computers becoming from novelties becoming like a really essential part of doing business and everyday life, and just causing rises in productivity in almost all the sectors. So even if now you are thinking about doing something, it must contain computers and ICT in a certain way. So it became the paradigmatic way of conceptualizing anything related to a techno-economic activity. So how are these relevant for QT and QEI as a community? Well, one thing we need to kind of acknowledge is that there are these business cycles. They are a fact of the market economy. They have been around for more than 150 years, and there is no reason to expect that they just cease to exist. And each of these cycles is more or less associated with a specific constellation of technologies. The second thing that is kind of relevant for us is that we are closing to the end of the fifth techno-economic paradigm, which means there is an expected revolution to happen soon, or maybe it is already happening. And one argument here is that quantum technologies has the potential to be a contender for forming the new constellation of technologies to kickstart this revolution. And for the thing that is most relevant for QEI, I think, is this definition of paradigm, a best practice model for the most effective ways of the using of the new technologies. But what does it mean to be effective? When we are talking about the emergence of a new techno-economic paradigm, Perez also has some ideas on this, so she's still active, working on this, and she argues for a green and socially equitable direction for the current paradigm that is also supposed to be a guide for the next paradigm. And I really like this argument from her. She says the space of the technologically possible is much greater than that of the economically profitable and socially acceptable. So these are important terms in the sense that if a technology or a constellation of technologies, they definitely need to be technologically possible, because otherwise you cannot realize them. They need to be economically profitable, because you need to convince a lot of actors in the market economy and society in general, because economics is not just about market economy, to invest on it, to commit their times on it, to commit their careers on it. And also it should be socially acceptable, because otherwise it won't get the same feedback effect from its potential consumers and developers. And why is it relevant for QEI? Well, I didn't want to put the QEI papers here because it would be self-advertisement. But this idea of, okay, there's an energy advantage, or there might be an energy advantage. Energy is an important topic, so we need to focus on this. This idea has been, I think, it has been settling in the community for quite some time, and I don't think anybody would strongly argue against this kind of an approach. And why is this relevant now? Well, when you look at the power consumption of supercomputers around the world, it is clearly increasing, not exponentially, but rather rapidly. And at least there's a need for a new paradigm that relates to these devices, or this capacity to compute, let's say. And it's not just the energy consumption. If you look at certain other parameters like the frequency of these devices, it's like there is a stagnation in the field of semiconductors and ICT and transistors in general. I shouldn't say there's a stagnation in semiconductors, but at least this silicon-based approach to building transistors. And in terms of social acceptability, there has been some growing noises in the general social sphere on the energy consumption of semiconductor industry, crypto coins, all that AI, or all the ICT fields, or let's say all the novel ICT fields. So the energy consumption and energy efficiency is becoming a social topic, not just an economic topic. And so this is from the National Academy Press's Quantum Computing Prospects report. And here they kind of map this log scale graph to the sales of the transistors or the global semiconductor industry. And of course, we shouldn't expect something to grow in the log scale, indefinitely, because there are limits to this growth. But it is clear and also nice to see that there was this rather strong growth in sales in the early years of the global semiconductor industry, but this has been slowing down, although it's still increasing. It has been growing in a considerable manner. It has been slowing down compared to the early phases. So if you remember the S-shaped curve, the earlier phases are more resembling more the exponential growth, and the later phases are more like a diminishing return kind of a growth. And well, because of all these discussions on energy efficiency, sales, and also security in a sense, the IEEE has launched this Rebooting Computing Task Force, and I kind of showed this before. And energy efficiency is an important part of this task force, which means QEI plays an important role in terms of being a reflection of these discussions in the quantum computing community. So we can ask, can the next techno-economic paradigm be a quantum techno-economic paradigm? Well, not an easy task. First of all, there are still discussions on whether building a large-scale quantum computer is technologically possible. And even if it is technologically possible, there is the discussion of whether it is economically profitable. I didn't put the name of the company initially. This is the stock price, but it really doesn't matter, because if you look at any public quantum computing company, they will kind of resemble this kind of a decrease. And you might think that this is about the market, but if you look at the market in general, it has been growing rather strongly in the basically last year. So, this is definitely against the market. And whether it is socially acceptable or not, there are discussions on, of course, they are not real discussions in the sense that they are being done in a parliamentary domain. But should we build quantum computers at all because of the potential threat they kind of present to our existing infrastructure? But there are also discussions on, is it too early? Do we really need them? Or these kind of discussions that are not really high P. Okay, let me just put to the next slide. What I was trying to mean is the hype is slowing down. The environment that existed like 5-6 years ago, it is not really there. This doesn't mean that there is a public backlash on these technologies, but there are other things that are coming up. For example, AI is much more present in the public discourse. There are discussions on synthetic biology, new space, green technology. So, because remember that when we are talking about the new techno-economic revolution, it requires a constellation of technologies. And the argument with the quantum technologies is that there are enough different niches in this, the thing we describe as quantum technology. So there it is communication, there's computation, there's sensing, so that it forms a constellation by itself. But almost all of them are still very immature and with very low TRLs. And what happens is that the capital is becoming more and more expensive every day. So the investment costs of kickstarting these technologies is becoming more and more risky every day. The hype is slowing down, as I said, and there's a rise of techno-economic protectionism that as a primarily scientific community, I don't think we know how to contend with. We don't know how to position ourselves in this rising trend around the world. So this is, by the way, not just a US or Europe problem. This is a global trend. So one thing I think we need to do as a community in general is to identify, which technologies are we competing with and which technologies are complementary to QT. I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but there's an entire literature out there focusing on these questions, in terms of assets, in terms of knowledge, in terms of production. There are all these complementarity and incommensurate discussions going on. And I really think that this kind of a mindset, at least at a certain point, is required in quantum technologies community as well. And again, this is the second time for most of you probably, but there is this concept called the path-dependence. Very quickly, if you look at the keyboards that we use, the QWERTY keyboards, there's no real reason for us to use them in these kind of devices, our phones, because there's no, the reason that this layout was developed goes back to the physical typewriters. But now we don't have any physical parts in terms of that can create problems with the layout. So we can change the layout as we like on our devices, but we don't. Most of the people use either this layout or a very similar layout, and it's not just because it is very effective or great, but it is a path dependency. We all know it, we all know how to use it, other people also know how to use it, so we just stick with it. A similar historical example is the trains or the train tracks. The history of these tracks go back to the horse-drawn wagons and the initial train tracks that are used in coal mines, and basically its histories go even earlier on to the Roman times, and the size of these Roman roads were designed to accommodate 2 horses. So there's a huge path dependency on the sizes of trains that we use that goes back to the sizes of the horses in the Roman times. So it's really hard to kind of divert from these really settled path dependent trajectories. And the one thing that is important for us to notice in our community is that in initial phase of any development of a technology, there are many options. But as time moves on and the technology matures, certain options become obsolete, and certain other ones are more and more adopted by more and more stakeholders in the ecosystem and in general society. And in the end, there is only one path that is emerging, and all the other options are basically out of question at that point. So this is something we call the lock-in moment. And if you look at this kind of a graph, and again, I want to note that these are from the 80s, so these are not really related to all the novel discussions on AI and synthetic biology. So these are some kind of eternal discussions in the development economics space related to technology, because you can take this this graph or this concept and apply it to early steam engines as well. So these concepts are kind of really core concepts when we are thinking about technological development, or especially techno-economic development. And here you can see that, so initially let's assume there's A, there's B, two different options, but as time moves on, more and more people or more and more customers adopt B, and there's a point in time or a point in market that after a certain percentage of the market adopted B, there's no way for people to go back and adopt A, and A is probably already obsolete. One example of this in the literature is Betamax versus VHS, or different type of cassettes that were used, or the cassette technology that were used in the 80s. And one thing again I would like to very quickly introduce is this concept called the Coleridge dilemma. So the idea is that in the early stages of a technological development, you have a large possibility of control of the trajectory of a technology, but you have you really don't know the impact, or you don't have the evidence for the impact of this technology, or this trajectory that you're choosing. But as time moves on, the possibility of control, just you lose it, but you gain out of evidence, and at some point you have enough evidence for the impact of the path you have taken, but you already taken that path, so it's really hard to reverse and choose another path. And the final concept I would like to introduce is this thing called the technology adoption and diffusion. So this is the general, technology adoption theory. There are innovators, there are early adopters, there's an early majority, and as these different groups adopt a technology, as the technology diffuses in a market, then the market share follows this kind of an S-shaped curve, which is very similar to the one that I showed you in the earlier phases. Of course, this is not always true for all the technologies. So I really like this graph in the sense that it kind of shows that this is the theory and this is the data. It is similar, but it is not really, corresponding on the theoretical model one-to-one. So when we are thinking about these tools that are, or these concepts also that are developed by the economists, we should consider them as, useful concepts for us, but not like the only real truth of the matter out there. And if you look at things like microwaves and landlines, so here you can see there's a 100% market share, but then they might also start falling out of the favor of the public. So I don't think a lot of people use landlines these days, because there was a competing technology that took over, and now people are more reliant on their smartphones to make calls compared to their landlines. But there's still a considerable amount of people who use landlines. So, conclusions. Well, the economics and social sciences literature on this topic can provide valuable insights on how to think about the work the QT community is involved in, which is, in general, it can be both about the development of a technology, but also about thinking on the potential societal impact, potential economics, potential competition, potential innovation systems about these technologies. The second part is a new techno-economic revolution is due, or maybe even occurring. If you look at ChatGPT and other kind of emerging technologies, here's a question. You kind of see that there is this thing going on, that there's something happening. You can't put your finger on it really, but there is this thing happening. But the outcomes are definitely not determined. And there's still room for intervention, both from our community and in general. And that is one of the reasons why you see all these, discussions on, so what is the next big thing? Because everybody expects, and they are kind of right to expect, that there will be a next big thing, but nobody really knows what it will be. And yeah, quantum technologies may play an important role, but that is definitely not a certainty. So we need to be careful about, what is technologically possible, what is economically profitable, and what is socially acceptable. And the outcome of the efforts of the community should be, well, basically all of them. So if you kind of come up with these ideas, it will be economically profitable, perfect, it will be socially acceptable, but well, it's not technologically possible, then it doesn't really make sense. So we need to nail all three simultaneously. And yeah, that was the presentation. I'm really curious about the discussion part.
Thank you, Zeki. That was brilliant. So I'm clapping for everyone. You can put your best emojis. So now, as you just said, we will dive in the discussion part. So I see there's already a question in the chat. You can as well just turn on your camera, raise a hand, and or just take the mic and speak. So before asking my own question, I will ask I will repeat the one that are in the chat from Mohamed Nabil Faradis. In terms of techno-economic revolution, how is your opinion if some argue that quantum technology actually support other game in AI, synthetic biology, space exploration? So quantum technology can be the baseline and support other initiative. So if I understand correctly, maybe there is not one leading technology, but they may all merge into one. And other than capital, what do you see as the barrier for the quantum technology development? And you.
Well, those two are really good questions. Thanks for them. Thanks for asking them. And so one thing related to the first question is, well, it definitely should be, because if a technology right now isn't supporting the other ones, then it's really difficult for them to form a constellation. But if we go to the literature and see what Perez wrote, the discussion she kind of produced is that the interconnectedness of these technologies should mainly come from the same areas of knowledge, or use similar engineering principles, and they should require similar skills. So the idea is that I don't think synthetic biology and QT right now either come from similar areas of knowledge or require similar skills. So the reason for these items is that they kind of create these positive feedback loops into the development of these technologies. So if you use similar skills, which are often new ones, and the reason for these new ones is that there is not an established order developing the potential workforce, then let's say the opportunity space for these new entrepreneurs is greater, because they are competing with less number of competitors, but also they can use their skills to target very different potential markets and potential opportunities. So if someone can come up with a kind of a quantum algorithms-based approach to AI, synthetic bios, space exploration, then it would be great for quantum technologies, because you can apply this really core set of skills, which is development of quantum algorithms, to very different fields that are rather important for the market and for the society right now. But if we can't do that, then I think it will not be that kind of a supporting scheme, but on the contrary, it will be kind of a competing scheme, because people will argue that, okay, synthetic bio, we have an AI solution for that, why go quantum? Or space exploration, we have an AI solution for that, why use quantum sensors? We can develop a certain AI-based sensors that is of higher resolution, stuff like that. So I don't think it's a given. I think it's something that the community really needs to work on to develop as a community in general. And other than capital, what do you see as the barrier of QT development? There are many reports on this. What I might contribute to is I think there's this friction going on right now in the community in general, because technology is not innovation, and innovation is definitely not science. So these are different concepts, and as long as in general everybody thinks of this set of technologies as still science, just science, then it will be really difficult to just commercialize them. But on the other hand, if the scientific background is not developed enough to support the technologization of these knowledge bases, then again you will not have this considerable space on what is technologically possible, because what is technologically possible really depends on your knowledge base. So if you start from a knowledge base that is not really suitable for developing technologies on it, then you will have real problems, because what capital does is that it kind of translates this knowledge base into technologies and then innovation. But if there's more suitable paths for the capital to be applied on your knowledge base, then you will require much less capital to actually commercialize a technology. That's why scientific exploration is still important, even in very established technologies. And QT is definitely not an established set of technologies now.
Thank you.
I don't know whether that answered the question or not, but yeah.
The person that asked it can always go. Anyone want to ask a question? If not, I have a few, but yes, Andreas, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead, Andreas.
Thank you. And one part of my thought relates to the second question from Mohammed. But first of all, thank you for this refreshing talk. And it's particularly refreshing, as you've seen all, we just finished here in Switzerland the week of Davos with lots of talks on quantum. And frankly, to summarize and oversimplify maybe, the tone was quite different from the last 45 minutes. The tone was, this is already decided. It is the big thing. It is happening. It's just a question of how much money we put it and how fast we move. And that is simply wrong in my humble point of view. So I value, Zeki, this refreshing and broad and quite neutral perspective on that. I would offer a thought on the very good second question from Mohammed. Other than capital, what is needed or what are the barriers? Going in with what I said before, there might simply be scientific and engineering barriers which are just too expensive or impossible to solve. Quantum memories, or just getting a hold on decent amounts of money on the noise in the quantum devices might turn out to be really, really, really difficult and not worth it. So we can't buy everything for money, simply put. That's my thought I would offer to the second question from Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you, Andres, and thanks for the kind words related to this presentation. I definitely agree. As I said, people usually think that, okay, labor plus capital plus some sort of, knowledge base equals to technology, but it really matters, that knowledge base, because that knowledge base, if it's not really suitable for commercialization or at least developing a technology out of, then you really need to increase the labor and the capital part. And, if another technology just surpasses you or just delivers better results, then it really doesn't make sense for the market to go with the technology that you have, because there are different and competing contenders out there. And one thing in this, contra DF cycles and the techno-economic development discussions is that people, at least initially, usually assume that, okay, it is these technologies that are creating these growths in the market, and so it was the causal direction was, okay, there are these technologies that are causing these business cycles, but it is kind of a mutual thing. They are mutually causing each other, because the markets, as they kind of grow, they are looking for novel and new. They're basically looking for expanding the market size and the solutions, and there are many different potential ways to do it. To do that, so it's not really settled. It's not, okay, so it's quantum technologies and we will do it. But what about AI? What about the other things going on? What about synthetic biology? So they might just come in and swoop this, this. Basically being the title of the defining technology of the next 50 years. And to assume that it's already quantum technologies, I think a very dangerous position to take on the side of the people who are invested in quantum technologies.
Rob, you wanted to say something?
Sorry, yes. So I had a question about this path dependence. So that when you what you said about when you can choose the path of a technology in the early stages, when you don't maybe have as much information about the technology, and in the later stages you have all the information, but it's hard to choose the path. Of course, I guess research could play a significant role in that. I guess when people were developing, I don't know, in let's say. In the 15th and 16th century, when people developed technologies, they were developing by trial and error, and maybe not so much sort of systematic research. Do you know of any examples where you can say that research allows you to see enough into the future to avoid going down paths that are suboptimal, and that that you make an argument for research that says that at a time when people didn't do so much research, many technologies were suboptimal, and now there are less, or the reverse? I don't know. Is there anything known about that?
Yeah, that's a very good question and a very good point. Well, one argument that I can make is, but I think it might be a very stupid example, but think about, I can't pronounce his name, but think about the failed Soviet experiment on genetics of crops.
Yes. Yeah, I've forgotten his name as well. Google will tell us, but
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically a very early implementation of genetic modification through interesting ideas, let's phrase it like that. But I think it's a good example on what you kind of said. It was not really well researched. It was not really well established. They tried to implement it without having a strong knowledge base, and then they kind of failed, and it resulted in kind of a really problematic situation for the entire Soviet Union in that sense. I'm sure there are examples like that in the Western market and economies as well, but probably we need to go and look for them, because at least the idea of a kind of an open market is that it is a corrective structure. If something kind of fails, it cannot fail that spectacularly. Something else will come and seize the day. At least that's the theory in general, in general.
So on that subject, I liked your plots of the different technologies, how they grow and shrink. The only ones you showed that shrinked were ones where they were, I guess, clearly replaced by another technology that does the same thing. Yeah.
This one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the ones that if you put a plot in terms of the outcome for the consumer rather than the particular technology, I guess you would put landline and mobile phones on the same plot, and then it would continue to go up. But I'm wondering about that. So the only example I have in recent history of a technology that has really disappeared, that was not replaced, is supersonic flight for non-military purposes, right? So there was Concorde, and I think the Russians also developed some equivalent of Concorde, but it only flew a couple of times. And somehow society decided we do not need supersonic flight. I'm sure there must be lots of other things, but we forget so easily when things disappear, we forget them. So it's hard to find them maybe, but do you know of other things like that?
One example I really like to use is that it's not, about disappearing, but do you remember from the early 2000s, there was this device that was supposed to revolutionize in-city mobility, that I think it was called Segway or something. You were able to stand up and then it just moves. So it is. I think that technology is very similar to the ones we use. These e-scooters right now, but it disappeared for almost 20 years. So there are these things that I don't think instead of disappearing, they just can't make it out of the ground, so they cannot even start their exponential growth trajectory. And the technology is there, but it is either not economically profitable or not socially acceptable or neither. So so that's one of my arguments against, because sometimes people say that, if there is a technology that is possible, it will definitely be realized. That's the techno push kind of an idea, and we know that it's not true. There are a lot of things that are technologically possible, but we do not do them. But that's also good.
But actually, it seems like those Segway scooters is an excellent example, because they clearly were in the exponential growth. I saw policemen riding on them in various different countries in Europe. That's the main place I saw them in the early 2000s. And somehow then people decided they didn't like them, even though apparently they were economically viable and socially acceptable. But I don't know.
If people don't like them, then they are not socially acceptable.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
No, and also we can think about this like the flying cars. Flying cars have been around since the 40s, right? But they didn't take off.
Yeah.
Would you say that flying cars are technology viable?
I know that there are a lot of people working on them, and they have been technologically possible and even technologically viable for quite some time. Yeah, but still, they're like, are they really economically profitable? Is it a really meaningful way to travel? I don't know. And even if it is, I don't think it will be socially really acceptable for everyday travel, because, compared to land transportation, flying is much more carbon intensive.
Right, I will jump in and ask also one question. I really like the concept of path dependence also, because it really shows that QEI has a sense, has a role to play in quantum technologies, because we are still in this early stage of development. But my question is more like, okay, this concept exists, there is a lock-in at some point. How can we influence it? How can we actually have a role in where does the technology will go? Or is it just the market or some abstract entity that will decide? Or can we actually impact it And if so, how? Which is the relevant question for QEI, I guess.
Yeah, so again, that's a really good question. And one thing that maybe we need to be, we need to agree on is that the market is not, just an abstract thing that is out there. It is defined, or we kind of, so there's this thing called the supermarket of ideas, and so you can make a market out of everything, but the real point there is that there needs to be some problems and there needs to be some solutions, and the mapping of them is kind of what drives any market. And well, one thing is, if there is no technologically possible or viable ways to do a energy efficient quantum computer, then it really doesn't matter how many people want it to happen or wants to buy them. If it's not there, then you cannot make it happen. Or let's say if it's not possible to do one. And there's a supply demand aspect to it. So there needs to be a certain supply to answer certain kind of demand. But also you need to create demand, and that creation of demand, it can come from economics, like a profit-based place. It can also come from a social place, because there are different types of capital. It's not just financial capital, so people kind of they are differently weighted for every individual and every culture and all that stuff. But still, it's not just about money. So I think even just talking about this and to say that there is a way to make these devices more energy efficient, if people keep hearing this from different places, then at some point, hopefully, they will start demanding it, which will create a demand, which will kind of guide the supply side of these technologies. So this is one way. I'm not saying this is the only way, but this is like a demand pool. So it's like you can, the demand can pull the development trajectory of a technology into a certain path that if such a demand didn't exist, wouldn't be taken by the people who are actually developing these technologies, or the companies who are actually developing these technologies.
Okay, so we should try to influence demand, because maybe a quantum computer not energy efficient is technologically viable, and the demand for quantum computer will be so high that they will just not care about energy efficiency. So we have somehow to find a way to create this demand, right?
Yeah, definitely. Just think about any industry before 70s. They really didn't care about these kind of environmental impacts, because A, some of them didn't know, it wasn't very common knowledge, but B, in general, it was just a negative externality. So these kind of, so in economics, there's this thing called negative externality, which means you do not put these externalities into your calculations. When you are trying to identify the price of a product, let's say, if that product generates a very little amount of carbon dioxide or very high amount of carbon dioxide, if the carbon dioxide is not priced, and I'm not just saying priced in the terms of monetary, but also reputation, social capital, all that stuff. If it's not priced in the market, then you do not put it into your calculations. So a kind of a push to make this thing a relevant parameter for those who are making these kind of calculations is a viable option. I'm not saying it's the only option, but it is one way to approach this issue of, okay, how can we make these devices more energy efficient, and also how can we make the market adopt this energy efficiency condition as a relevant condition for developing these devices.
Thank you. Does anyone want to say something at this point? I guess this is a good time to thank you again and close the recording. We can still continue to discuss informally without recording. But yeah, thanks everyone for attending, and see you next time for the next QEI seminar.